Our first story is from Robert from Michigan. He lived a very scary moment. Let's see what he has to tell us. I remember one chilling evening when my family and I stopped at a McDonald's during a road trip. We were all hungry and tired, so the golden arches seemed like a beacon of relief in the darkness. As we entered the restaurant, an eerie feeling settled over me, like a weight on my chest. The atmosphere was strangely quiet, devoid of the usual bustle and chatter you'd expect in a fast food joint. I shrugged it off, attributing it to exhaustion, and we found a table near the back. While we waited for our food, I noticed odd occurrences. The lights flickered intermittently, casting unsettling shadows that danced across the walls. My parents exchanged uneasy glances, but we brushed it off as faulty wiring. Then things took a turn for the eerie. A woman dressed in outdated clothing and with a haunted look in her eyes approached our table. She seemed out of place, like a specter from another time. Without saying a word, she handed us a faded photograph. It depicted a family, but their faces were blurred, as if distorted by some unseen force. My blood ran cold as I realized that the family bore a striking resemblance to us. Before we could react, the woman let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the empty restaurant. Customers nearby looked around in confusion, but none seemed to notice the woman or the photograph she had left behind. We left in a hurry, the image of that spectral woman and the blurred faces haunting my thoughts long after we had driven away. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that McDonald's, but the memory still sends shivers down my spine. The second story is from Liam from Wisconsin. He and his friends lived a terrifying moment in their favorite restaurant. Let's see how the event went. I've always been skeptical about ghost stories. I mean, come on, spirits haunting abandoned houses or cemeteries. It all seemed like the stuff of Hollywood movies. But that all changed one fateful night at McDonald's. It was a chilly October evening, and my friends and I were craving some late-night fast food. With stomachs growling, we decided to head to the nearest McDonald's, a place we frequented often for our midnight snacks. Little did we know this visit would be unlike any other. As we entered the restaurant, the familiar smell of fries and burgers greeted us. But there was something different in the air. It was an eerie stillness, a silence that seemed to hang heavy over the place. Ignoring the odd feeling, we placed our orders and found a booth near the back. As we waited for our food, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. The usual sounds of chatter and laughter were absent, replaced by a sense of unease that seemed to permeate the air. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to my overactive imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure standing in the corner of the restaurant, partially obscured by the shadows. It was tall and thin, with long, gnarled fingers that curled menacingly at its sides. My heart skipped a beat as I realized that none of my friends seemed to notice its presence. I tried to focus on my conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I glanced in the figure's direction, it seemed to move closer, its form shifting and contorting in the darkness. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air became almost palpable. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end as a sense of dread washed over me. I wanted nothing more than to leave, to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the restaurant, but something kept me rooted to my seat. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and dimmed, plunging the restaurant into darkness. Panic erupted as patrons scrambled for their phones, casting feeble beams of light into the void. In the chaos, I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, sending a chill down my spine. I turned to see the figure looming over me, its face contorted into a twisted mask of fury. Its eyes bore into mine, filled with a hatred that sent shivers down my spine. Before I could react, it let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the darkness, freezing me in place. When the lights flickered back to life moments later, the figure was gone, as if it had never been there at all. My friend stared at me in confusion, unaware of the terror that had just unfolded before my eyes. I tried to explain what had happened, but the words caught in my throat, drowned out by the pounding of my heart. We left the McDonald's that night, our appetites forgotten in the wake of what we had experienced. As we drove home in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled upon something beyond our understanding, something dark and sinister lurking in the shadows of that seemingly ordinary restaurant. From that day on, I've been haunted by the memory of the figure in McDonald's, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we can't explain. And as much as I try to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, a part of me knows that what I saw that night was all too real. Our final story is from Rebecca from the city of Detroit. Let's see what she has to tell us. I never believed in ghosts until I stepped foot into the McCafe at McDonald's on that fateful evening. It was a quaint little place, tucked away in a corner of the bustling city, and I had always found solace in its cozy atmosphere. But little did I know, that night would change everything. I had been studying for hours at the nearby library and decided to take a break for some caffeine and a snack. As I entered the McCafe, I was greeted by the familiar smell of coffee beans and the sound of soft music playing in the background. It felt like stepping into a warm embrace after a long day. I ordered my usual, a hot cup of coffee and a blueberry muffin, and found a table by the window. As I sipped my coffee and savored the sweetness of the muffin, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was subtle at first, just a nagging sensation in the back of my mind, but it soon grew into something more sinister. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I was not alone in the McCafe. There, sitting at the table across from me, was a figure cloaked in darkness. It was as if the shadows themselves had taken form, obscuring any features the figure might have had. I blinked, thinking it was just a trick of the light, but when I opened my eyes, the figure was still there, watching me with unseen eyes. I tried to focus on my food, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a heavy blanket. The air grew thick with tension, and the once comforting sounds of the McCafe now seemed to echo with a sense of dread. Then, as if on cue, the lights flickered and dimmed, casting the McCafe into darkness. Panic surged through me as I groped blindly for my phone, desperate for even the smallest glimmer of light. But as I fumbled with the screen, I heard something that made my blood run cold, a whisper, soft and insidious, like a snake slithering through the darkness. I strained to make out the words, but they were just beyond my grasp, teasing me with their incomprehensibility. The whisper seemed to come from all around me, filling the McCafe with its haunting melody. I wanted to run, to escape the suffocating darkness, but I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the whisper stopped and the lights flickered back to life. I blinked in the sudden brightness, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure across from me was gone, vanished into thin air like a wisp of smoke. I stumbled to my feet, my hands shaking as I grabbed my belongings and fled the McCafe. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something beyond my comprehension, something dark and otherworldly lurking in the shadows of that seemingly ordinary McCafe. From that day on, I avoided that McCafe like the plague, haunted by the memory of the whispering darkness that had consumed it. And though I tried to convince myself it was just a figment of my imagination, a part of me knew that what I had experienced that night was all too real. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more spooky, real, true stories. This is Shadows of the Night. See you soon.